In the depths of the Algerian Sahara, where roads fade and the last traces of civilization disappear, lies a city with no gates, no walls, and no inhabitants, yet its name has stirred fear, curiosity, and controversy all at once. A city the desert dwellers say is haunted by Djinn, while others believe it holds clues to visits from non-human beings, as archaeologists describe it as one of the greatest open historical libraries recounting the story of early man in the vast Sahara. This is Sefar, the place many call the city of the Djinn. To understand how this legend was born, we must begin with its real location. Sefar is not a city in the sense we know today, but a part of the Tassili Enadja Plateau in southeastern Algeria, a region classified by UNESCO as a World Heritage Site for its unparalleled archaeological and natural wealth. It is a world of sandstone rock sculpted by winds over tens of thousands of years, transformed into columns, arches, passageways, and labyrinths resembling the streets of a massive city whose inhabitants left their places in a time immemorial. When a visitor enters these labyrinths, he feels as if he has disconnected from the world he knows, no sound but the gusts of wind, no movement but the shadows of the rocks changing shape with the sun. Perhaps this feeling of isolation and mystery is what drove the people of the desert to weave tales around it. The Tuareg, who have known these lands for centuries, pass down stories of voices heard at night, of places where spending the night is ill-advised, and of hidden beings dwelling among the rocky corridors. But behind these tales lies a far more fascinating truth, for on the walls of these rocks are spread thousands of drawings dating back to different periods of prehistory, drawings of animals that no longer live in the desert today, such as giraffes, elephants, hippopotamuses, and cattle. And here begins the first mystery. How could a desert known today for its harshness and aridity have once been the home of such creatures? The answer science provides is astonishing in itself, for thousands of years ago, the Great Sahara was not a desert as we know it, but a green land crisscrossed by rivers and dotted with lakes and pastures. Hunters and herders lived there and left on the walls of the Tassili a pictorial record of their lives, never knowing their drawings would ignite debate thousands of years later. In 1956, the French researcher Henri Ihaut arrived in this region at the head of an exploratory expedition. He was not searching for Djinn or treasures, but for an understanding of the rock art on the Tassili walls. During his work, he copied and documented thousands of drawings, introducing the world to one of the greatest artistic treasures in human history. Yet one single drawing would steal the spotlight from all the rest, a massive figure, larger than the other forms surrounding it, bearing a round head and ambiguous features, surrounded by a halo that gives it an unearthly appearance. Henri Ihaut named it the Great God of Sefar, and from that moment, the interpretations began. Was this drawing representing a god worshipped by the region's inhabitants? Was it part of unknown religious rituals? Or did its strange features lead some to claim it depicts a being not of this world? Here, Sefar would enter the realm of legend through its widest doors and transform from a rare archaeological site into one of the world's most tantalizing enigmas. With the spread of images of these mysterious drawings from the depths of the Tassili, Sefar ceased to be a local tale passed down by desert folk, and its name began to echo in books, magazines, and documentaries across the globe. Everyone who looked upon those figures with round heads saw them through the lens of their own imagination, each trying to find an explanation that satisfied their perception of the past. Some said they were merely ritual drawings made by prehistoric people embodying their beliefs and ancestral spirits. Others saw them as evidence of human contact with unknown entities. Proponents of the ancient astronaut theory went even further, claiming the drawings represented visitors from other worlds and that Sefar conceals proof of their intervention in human history. But science was more cautious, archaeologists who studied the drawings for many years confirmed that ancient man used symbolism and exaggeration in expression, and that the massive figures with round heads could be embodiments of spiritual concepts or figures of special status in ancient societies. In the absence of written texts from that period, many interpretations remain within the realm of scholarly conjecture, not absolute certainty. Perhaps herein lies the true allure of sci-fi. It does not offer ready-made answers, but raises questions deeper than we expect. Who were those people who lived here thousands of years ago? How was their life in a desert that was not yet a desert? What drove them to draw these shapes on the walls? And what did they want to say to the future? The astonishing fact is that the Tassili Enagha contains not just tens or hundreds of drawings, but an estimated more than 15,000 drawings and rock engravings, documenting different phases of human development and environmental change in North Africa. There are hunting scenes, human processions, herds of cattle, and drawings of men and women engaged in daily activities, as if the rocks turned into books upon which early man carved his collective memory. Yet despite all this scientific evidence, the legend did not die. To this day, some desert guides refuse to walk certain passages at night, others recount a vague feeling of hidden eyes watching them from among the rocks, and some swear they heard incomprehensible whispers echoing within the stone labyrinths. It is important here to distinguish between folklore and scientific fact, for these narratives are part of the cultural identity of the region, not evidence of supernatural beings. However, they reveal something else no less important: the human capacity to imbue places with meanings that transcend stone and sand, turning them into part of our collective imagination. And the deeper we delve into the story of Sefar, the more we realize that the true mystery does not lie in the question, were there Djinn or mysterious beings? But in another, more fascinating question: how could a human who lived thousands of years ago, in a land whose face has completely changed, leave a trace still capable of baffling our minds and igniting our imagination to this day? Perhaps Sefar is not the city of the Djinn as the legends say, but it is undoubtedly the city of questions for which man has yet to find answers. And in the depths of the Algerian desert, the winds still pass through its ancient rocks, carrying with them the echoes of a distant past, a past that has not yet revealed all its secrets. With the advancement of scientific research, sci-fi began to surprise the world with a truth no less fascinating than the myths that surrounded it, for the story was no longer just about mysterious drawings on rock walls, but became a rare window revealing how the world itself changed. Nearly 10,000 years ago, the region we now call the Great Sahara was one of the most vibrant environments on the African continent. There were no endless sand dunes, nor a terrifying emptiness stretching to the horizon, but green plains where animals grazed, freshwater lakes where human groups gathered on their shores, and regular rains nourishing life in every direction. If we traveled back in time to that period, we would not believe we were standing in the very same place the world now sees as a harsh desert. The people here were hunting, raising livestock, conducting their rituals, and recording on the rocks what they deemed important in their lives. None of them knew that these drawings would become, thousands of years later, the strongest proof that the world's greatest desert was once a paradise pulsating with life. Then everything began to change, climate patterns gradually shifted, rains retreated, lakes dried up, and the greenlands began to lose their vitality year after year. With the advance of desertification, the people were forced to leave, abandoning their only trace upon the stones. They left, and the drawings remained, the herds departed, and their images stayed, the voices, rituals, and languages vanished, and sci-fi remained, waiting for someone to try and understand what those people wanted to say. Perhaps here begins the deepest kind of mystery, for we always tend to believe the past was simpler than the present, and that ancient man was naive and limited in imagination. But Sefar forces us to reconsider this perception, for the drawings do not merely reflect daily life, but reveal a complex spiritual and symbolic world, figures wearing masks, mysterious processions, bodies in ritualistic postures, and shapes whose meaning to their creators we cannot know with certainty. Were they prayers? Were they rites of passage from childhood to adulthood? Were they celebrations linked to hunting and fertility? Or were they something else for which we no longer possess the key to understand? The greatest tragedy in history is not just the loss of cities and the collapse of civilizations, but the loss of the meanings of the things their creators left behind. And perhaps Sefar is the greatest example of this, for we see the images but we do not hear the voices that accompanied them, we see the forms but do not know the stories from which they were born, we try to understand, but those who held the answers departed thousands of years ago. On the quiet nights of the Tassili, when the day's heat fades and the sky fills with stars, it is easy to understand why the legend of the city of the Djinn was born. You find yourself alone among rocky labyrinths thousands of years old, surrounded by drawings of people whose names you do not know, staring into faces drawn by a human who died before the birth of all the civilizations we know today. In those moments, the boundary between science and imagination dissolves, between reality and legend. And perhaps Sefar is not the city of the Djinn, but it is certainly a city that reminds us that man, since the dawn of history, has never stopped asking the greatest question, who are we? And what do we leave behind us when time swallows us? With every step we advance in the story of Sefar, we realize that the true mystery does not lie in the drawings alone, but in the place itself. These rocky labyrinths stretching over vast areas have not yet revealed all their secrets. Every year, new explorers and researchers arrive at the Tassili, and some return with images of engravings never documented before, or passages not previously known on maps. And here another question, no less fascinating, arises. If Sefar has revealed to us so far thousands of drawings, how many more remain hidden behind rocks no one has reached? And how many stories were lost forever before finding someone to listen to them? The Tassili Enaja is not merely an archaeological site, but a massive library written on stone. However, most of its pages have been damaged by wind and time, and the little that remains requires great caution in handling, for some of the drawings documented by Unri Ihote faced criticism because the copying and fixing methods used at that time were not always ideal, affecting some fine details. This reminds us that studying the past is no easy task, for we are not dealing with living witnesses, but with silent traces that need the utmost care and objectivity. Perhaps for this reason, many researchers refuse to be swept away by the sensational interpretations that attract quick viewership, for saying Sefar is a city of Djinn or a center for extraterrestrial visits may be exciting, but it lacks confirmed archaeological evidence. Yet rejecting these theories does not mean Sefar has lost its magic. On the contrary, the scientific truth itself is astonishing. Imagine standing before a drawing etched by a human 7,000 years ago, a drawing that survived storms, climate change, the collapse of civilizations, and the succession of generations to reach you in this era. It is a form of immortality, not the immortality of bodies, but the immortality of a trace. And perhaps this is what those people unknowingly sought, to leave a sign that says, "We were here. We loved and we feared. We drew and we dreamed. We tried to understand the world around us. And if our names have vanished, our shadows will remain on these rocks." When we look at Sefar today, we should not see just the city of the Djinn, nor view it as a dry archaeological site devoid of spirit, but see it as a bridge connecting the first humans who drew their dreams on stone, and us, who today try to understand the meaning of our existence on this planet. Perhaps, after all this journey into the depths of the Tassili, the most important question is not, did Djinn inhabit Sefar. But what will our descendants say about us thousands of years from now? Will they understand the messages we left behind? Or will they stand before our traces with the same astonishment we feel today before the drawings of Sefar, wondering about their creators, their dreams, their fears, and the secrets they carried with them into the dust of time? In the heart of the Algerian desert, Sefar remained silent, confirming no legend and denying none. It does something greater than that. It invites us to look at the past with humility, at the present with wonder, and at the future with the question that never dies: how many more secrets does the desert still hide beneath its sands? Yet the story of Sefar does not end with the drawings, nor with the legends, nor even with the scientific interpretations, for there is another truth many overlook: reaching Sefar itself is no easy task. The place that sparked the imagination of millions remains to this day relatively isolated from the modern world. The road to it passes through vast stretches of desert, then turns into a strenuous journey on foot among plateaus, narrow passages, and rocky labyrinths. For this reason, Sefar has not turned into a bustling tourist destination, but has retained much of its majesty and isolation. And perhaps this isolation is what saved it, for if Sefar were in an easily accessible location, its drawings might have been subjected to vandalism, theft, or obliteration under the pressure of heavy visitation. But the desert, which created its mystery, also became its faithful guardian. Nevertheless, time is merciless. Climate change, natural erosion, and temperature fluctuations continue to affect the rock drawings slowly but steadily. Every line that disappears from the walls of Sefar means the loss of a part of humanity's memory that can never be recovered. For this reason, the role of researchers is no longer limited to studying the site, but its protection has become a global responsibility, for Sefar does not belong to Algeria alone, but is part of the history of all humanity. At a time when the pace of life is accelerating, and screens and modern technologies dominate the details of our day, Sefar stands as a silent reminder that man was, and still is, a being searching for meaning, a being who draws his fears and dreams, and tries to leave a trace that resists oblivion. Perhaps those herders and hunters who drew on the rocks of the Tassili never imagined that people thousands of years later would analyze their lines, make documentaries about them, differ over their meanings, and search within them for answers to questions born thousands of years after their death. And perhaps if one of them could see us today, he would smile at our astonishment, because we call it the City of the Djinn, others call it the greatest open-air art gallery in the world, and scientists see it as an archive of climate and man, while for its creators, perhaps, it was simply a sincere expression of a life they lived and wished not to be forgotten. And here, at the end of this long journey, we return to the question with which we began. Is Sefar a city of Djinn hidden in the depths of the desert? The truth is there is no scientific evidence to prove that. Is it merely an ordinary archaeological site? That might also be an oversimplification that diminishes its grandeur. For Sefar is too great to be confined to a legend, and too deep to be reduced to a dry history. It is a place where truth meets imagination, science meets wonder, and the past meets the present. And perhaps, after this documentary ends, the image of those mysterious faces drawn on the rocks will remain in your mind, staring into the darkness for thousands of years, as if waiting for us to understand their message. Or perhaps they wish to remind us of something simpler than all the theories, that the greatest secrets are not always in what we fear or imagine, but in what we have not yet learned how to listen to. But perhaps the most awe-inspiring thing about the story of Sefar is that it forces us to confront a truth we rarely consider, that civilizations, no matter how strong and great they become, can disappear leaving behind only ambiguous traces and suspended questions. The people who drew on the walls of Sefar believed their world was the whole world. They had their languages, their songs, their fears, their dreams, their children running among the pastures, and their elders telling the stories of ancestors under the firelight. And perhaps they believed their lives would continue forever. Then the climate changed, the wind shifted, the rivers dried, the lakes vanished, and the people departed. Time erased their names from memory, and after thousands of years, nothing remained of them but lines on a rock, gazed upon by strangers who had not been born when they were drawn. Is there not a terrifying lesson in that? For we today build giant cities, erect skyscrapers, store our knowledge in digital devices, and believe our civilization cannot possibly fade. But sci-fi whispers to us in a quiet voice from the depths of time, nothing lasts forever. And perhaps this is the true secret that made people attribute the place to Djinn, for when man faces something beyond his understanding, he turns to legend, and when he cannot explain the mysterious, he fills the void with imagination. That is not a weakness, but a part of our human nature. Between science that demands proof, and legend that searches for meaning, the story of Sefar was born. For this reason, perhaps we will never know what the great god meant to its creators, nor whether those processions drawn on the rocks were religious rituals or social celebrations, and we will never hear the language spoken by those people as they drew their history on the walls of the Tassili. And perhaps herein lies the splendor of the matter, for not all mysteries were created to be solved, some exist to remind us of the limits of our knowledge, some keep the flame of curiosity burning inside us, and some make us raise our eyes to the star-studded sky on a desert night and wonder, how many stories were lost before they could be told? How many secrets were buried before they could be discovered? And how many other cities are waiting, in silence, for someone to reach them? In the end, Sefar may not be the city of the Djinn, nor a gateway to hidden worlds, nor evidence of extraterrestrial visits. But it is most certainly a witness to something greater, a witness that man, from the first line he drew on a cave wall, was trying to say to time, "Do not forget me." And among the ancient rocks of the Tassili, beneath the harsh desert sun, that ancient voice still resists oblivion, waiting for someone to pause for a moment and listen. As our journey in Sefar concludes, some may think we have finally reached the end. But the truth is that the end is nothing but the beginning of a new question. In the world we live in today, we read the news with the press of a button, store our information on giant servers, and believe everything can be preserved forever. But sci-fi reminds us that time is stronger than the greatest empires, and that nature is capable of rewriting the world over and over again. The desert that was once a green land became a sea of sand. The people who laughed, sang, and dreamed in this place turned into shadows drawn on rocks, and the tales that once filled the nights lost their voices in the blowing wind. Perhaps, thousands of years from now, other people will stand before the remains of our cities and wonder about us as we wonder today about the inhabitants of Sefar. What did they believe in? What did they fear? What were their dreams? And did they know they would one day become an enigma sought by strangers? The greatest gift Sefar offers us is not an answer, but humility. No matter how advanced our knowledge, there will always be what we do not know. No matter how sophisticated our tools, there will always be messages from the past we have not yet learned how to read. Perhaps for this reason, places like Sefar attract us, not because they prove the existence of Djinn, nor because they promise the discovery of mysterious beings, but because they restore to us that ancient feeling modern man has nearly lost, the feeling of wonder. Wonder at the vastness of time, wonder at the fragility of civilizations, wonder at man's ability to leave a trace that crosses thousands of years. And now, after we have wandered through the labyrinths of the Tassili, contemplated the faces of the mysterious drawings, and listened to the legends born in their shadows, the final question remains suspended in the desert air. Were we searching for the secret of Sefar, or were we, from the beginning, searching for the secret of man himself. For in the depths of the rock, between lines drawn by a nameless human, an ancient voice still whispers to us across the centuries: cities may disappear, civilizations may crumble, names may be lost, but man's desire to be understood, and to be remembered by those who come after, is the thing that triumphs over oblivion. And here, the story of Sefar ends. Or perhaps, it is only here that it truly begins.